A dramatic finish for Clemson in their win over Pittsburgh. It keeps their ACC hopes alive, also keeps their college football playoff hopes alive, because if Clemson wins the ACC, of course, they're going to be in the college football playoff. So does everyone think that Clemson's still there? Where are the projections now for Clemson? What bowl game are they projected to go to? Again, is anyone projecting them to go to the college football playoff? Let's take a look at some of those projections right now. App Sports has Clemson playing in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against Iowa State. So that game, I believe, is in Orlando, Florida. Iowa State right now sitting there with 2 losses. So one of the higher ranked Big 12 teams. Again, they are not projecting Clemson to make it to win the ACC championship, I should say. Of course, they could get there. They could get there and play SMU and lose and not get to the college football playoff. So there are, a couple different ways they could potentially wind up not making the playoff. But yeah, this will be a pretty good matchup. Iowa State's a team that started off really hot. Of course, they haven't looked so great as of late. And that's probably, if you don't make the playoff, probably the funnest bowl to go to. The bowl that gets the most attention is probably the Pop-Tarts Bowl because of the edible mascot. And that was, of course, a big deal last year. So, I mean, if I'm a Clemson fan, this is not the worst bowl to go to. Of course, you want to make the playoff. But if you don't make it, again, Pop-Tarts Bowl, not the worst bowl in the world. Let's look now at CBS Sports. They've got Clemson playing Minnesota in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. So this would be, a close-to-home bowl game. Probably have a lot of fans there. Minnesota's a team that has kind of got better as the season has gone along. Started off a little bit slow. But they've looked pretty good as of late. I think that would be a good matchup. Clemson, the more talented team for sure, but you never know in these bowl games. You don't know about the opt-outs. Clemson's a team that I don't think would have a ton of opt-outs, but you might have some. And again, this would be a pretty good matchup here. And like I said, close to home. So one option is maybe the funnest bowl, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and then another one close to home. But our other 2 projections have Clemson actually going out west to San Diego. So 24/7 Sports, they've got Clemson playing Arizona State in the Holiday Bowl. And again, this bowl game is in San Diego. So obviously a long ways out there. This would be an advantage travel-wise for Arizona State. Arizona State's still a team, though, that could possibly get into the Big 12 championship game and maybe even get to the college football playoff if they win that game. So maybe it's not Arizona State. Maybe it's BYU. Maybe it's, if BYU doesn't win the Big 12, I think that's a very good option. Perhaps even a Colorado if they don't win the Big 12. That could be a fun matchup, Clemson and Colorado. But again, they're projecting Arizona State. And same thing here from the Action Network. They are projecting Clemson to play Arizona State in the Holiday Bowl. So 2 of the 4 projections have Clemson going out west. And then another projection for the Pop-Tarts Bowl, another projection for the Duke's Mayo Bowl. So what does the FPI say about Clemson? Where are they at? Where are they? What do the numbers say for the rest of the season? Well, they've actually got them ranked number 12. That is where they are ranked in the FPI. A 15.3 FPI means against an average team on a neutral field, Clemson would win by 15.3. So they're pretty high on the Tigers. You see their projected win-loss total, 9.7 and 2.5. So they've got them, maybe going 10-2 or 10-3 if they were to make it to the ACC championship. They give them a 50.8% chance to win out, which means the FBI does favor them against South Carolina, with that number being over 50%. About a 20% chance to make it to the ACC championship, so not a huge number there. So what I find really interesting with the FBI, and where I think that they don't have it right here, they've got Clemson at 14.2% to win the ACC, but 21.3% to make the college football playoff. And look, if Clemson wins out, they're going to move up in the rankings, but they're not going to move up enough to get in the playoff unless we just get all-out chaos. I mean, there are too many teams in the way, too many teams that really don't have tough games remaining on their schedule. When you look at like Ole Miss, they got Mississippi State, Florida. You look at Georgia, they've got Georgia Tech. You look at Alabama, they've got Oklahoma and Auburn. I mean, you could see some upsets potentially, I guess, but it seems highly, highly unlikely to me that Clemson would get into the college football playoff without winning the ACC. I just don't see that happening. But the FBI thinks it's possible, again, with that number being higher than the number to win the ACC. So that is surprising to me. They give them a 1.6% chance to make it to the national championship, a 0.6% chance to win the national championship. So, yes, the FBI does give Clemson a shot. It's less than 1%, but they do give them a shot to win it all this year. And I would say this, if Clemson it's fortunate enough to get to the ACC championship, if Miami loses a game here in their final 2 games, which could happen. I mean, it absolutely could happen. They've almost lost a lot of games this year to not great teams. So you look at that Syracuse game on the road, that one could be a little bit tricky. But if they do get in, what I'll say is that there aren't really any elite teams this year. I think there's more parity at the top this year than we've seen in a long, long time. I think Oregon, Ohio State maybe have separated themselves a little bit, but anything could happen. One of those teams could get upset to like an SEC team or something like that. You don't know what the path would be for Clemson. If they win the ACC, they're going to get a first-round bye. So if they do get in, I'm just saying, you never know. You never know. I think Clemson wouldn't be one of the favorites, but I'm not going to say it'd be impossible. And again, if they got in, I think that number would be higher than 0.6%. But because they only have a 21.3% chance of getting in the first place, that's why that number is so low. All right, so let's look at some predictions. I'm going to give you my predictions the rest of the season. You look at my preseason predictions. So I picked them to lose to Georgia, and I didn't have them winning the rest of their games. I had them losing in the ACC championship to Miami, but still making it into the college football playoff. Now, of course, they've lost to Louisville. They need help to get into the ACC championship. It's going to be tough. And, I was just thinking about this. They've really been penalized for playing Georgia. If Clemson had not played Georgia, if they had played, a lower end team, let's say they had played Mississippi State in the opener and they won that game, they would be sitting there with 1 loss, not the greatest resume, but maybe a resume good enough, especially if they knock off a ranked South Carolina team in their final game, maybe a resume that would have been good enough to get them into the playoff as an 11-1 at-large team. But because they played Georgia and because they've got 2 losses, now it feels like their only path is to get in by winning the ACC. So, again, just wanted to point that out. They really got penalized for playing Georgia, which is something I don't like. But, again, given the circumstances, I understand why they're ranked where they are. But for the rest of the season, again, I started at 11-1. Now I'm at 9-3. I don't think they're going to beat South Carolina. I think they've got a great shot. I'm not going to say that the odds are low. I think it's close to a 50-50 game. But South Carolina has been really hot down the stretch. And they've got a defensive line and a pass rush that is really, really good. And I think that's going to cause some problems for Clemson. I think it's probably a lower scoring game. I think, again, it's a game Clemson could win. I'm not saying they have no shot, but if you ask me right now who I would pick, I would have to go with South Carolina in that game. But really, that game doesn't matter in terms of the playoff. They can lose that game, and if they win in the ACC championship, if they get in, they're going to be in the playoff. Of course, rivalry game, that game does matter. But you do have to wonder, what happens if, like, Tulane wins out, Boise State wins out? Could the ACC champion, a 9-3 Clemson team, then a 10-3 Clemson team, be left out of the playoff for 2 group of 5 champions? That's a possibility as well. So a lot of interesting scenarios here, but for Clemson, you just got to root for Miami's opponents. You need Miami to lose a game. If that happens, then they're in the ACC championship, and anything can happen from there.